Hello, everyone. It's Thursday, October 13th. I know it's not a normal day for us to have our hangout, but I thought hopefully I mentioned that we were going to have that tonight versus last night. I thought I did that in my weekly information to you. And as of right now, it's just me. Sent the link out and hopefully some folks join us. But I'm going to go ahead and in case we don't have anybody come join us tonight, and we'll plus this and we'll go from there. So I hope you're all having a good week. Hope you're having a good week preparing for doohickeys. And I know it's Thursday and it's due on Monday, 8 a.m. wherever you are. And I know that's a big challenge, and hopefully you're able to make that work and that's going okay with your groups. I know we've had one or two groups that have a couple of attendance issues that we're working on, but hopefully that's small and we'll go from there. So again, hope that's ongoing and working for you. At this point in time, I wanted to share just a brief spiritual thought with you tonight. Apologize for no tie, but we had a little medical procedure here, so it's a little uncomfortable to wear that tonight. So we'll be okay with that. I wanted to kind of reflect on President Monson's conference message, or not conference message, from October's Ensign, the home teaching and visiting teaching message. President Monson talks about a pretty simple concept, and the whole article that he has here is called The Blessings of Obedience. And there's a picture of the Tree of Life and some others, and again, it's the very first page of the Ensign or the first article if you're using that online. President Monson talks about the blessings of obedience. He is very blunt and very simple, and a couple of things. It says, and one of his comments are, the greatest lesson we can learn in mortality is that when God speaks and we obey, we will always be right. I think that's awesome. And he also goes on to say we will also be blessed. President Monson quote says, when we keep the commandments, our lives will be happier, more fulfilling, and less complicated. I really like that last part. In the world we have today, complicated lives are a big deal, and lots of us have stress because of complications in our lives. That said, it's nice to be able to know that when we keep the commandments, Heavenly Father, through his prophet, gives us a request or a promise that says our lives will be less complicated. I don't know about you, but I could use that. And so perhaps that's something that we can do. Again, one of the blessings of obedience. President Monson goes on to talk about that commandments are the guidelines for our journey home. And I certainly believe that, and certainly know that when he says that, the prophet is speaking. And it also looks like we have one person joining us. Tracy, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. I'm kind of in the middle of my spiritual thought, so not knowing if anybody was going to join me or not, I kind of started. So I'm going to go ahead and finish that, and then we'll jump in and go from there. How's that sound?
Sounds wonderful.
Okay. President Monson also talks about how when we choose to obey, that we have protection against the times we live in, as well as what he calls the tenor of our times is permissiveness. And certainly we don't have to equate obedience to being miserable and disobedience to being happy. Just the opposite, in fact, is that when we have obedience, it truly brings happiness into our lives. And again, referring back to that earlier comment from President Monson, he talks about simplicity and the way that our lives can be less complicated if we obey the commandments. So a thought for us as we go. I'm going to end this, and we'll have at least a conversation with Tracy and I. And I say this tonight in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Tracy, how are you?
I'm well. How about you?
I'm good. I am hoping that I did tell you guys that we were going to meet on Thursday instead of Wednesday. I did communicate.
Yes, you did. I even went earlier, an hour earlier, and verified the time. So it's posted, and yes, it was there.
Okay. I thought I was losing it there for a minute. We had some work meetings and some other things yesterday, so I apologize for that. So I just shared the spiritual thought with everyone and you, so appreciate you coming. You can be my sounding board. I promise I won't pick on you the whole night or make this a long drawn out thing. If it's just you,
Okay,
Um, how are things in your group? And again, keep in mind we're recording this, so it's not just you that'll be watching it. So
that's fine. We met
things in the group
last
going
night.
okay?
Yeah, we met last night and we actually had a very good discussion. I think there was 5 or 6 of us there. And we did really well.
How are you guys doing on your paper, if I can ask again in public, so to speak?
Yes, all of our problems were posted and probably about half of our solutions as of last night.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
That's great. You know, the first one always takes a little extra work to come together. So it sounds like you're doing a great job on you and your group. So, were there any questions either in you or for you or your group on the doohickeys process, the doohickeys posting, anything else that we hadn't talked about that we can that I can help refresh your memory with, or that of your group's discussion?
I'm just curious. I went looking back and I couldn't specifically find it, but is there a minimum page for this first paper?
Minimum word count. And again, in Word, you can do word count easily. It's 3,500 to 5,000 words.
Okay.
Not characters, words. So,
Yeah.
in the old days, that would have been 5 to 7 pages.
Yes.
Somewhere in that neighborhood. So
we're about there now, so I think we're doing fine.
Okay. Great. And I would add for you, Tracy, and everybody else, most of the time, a well-presented paper easily reaches that milestone. It easily gets to that point. And you know, I don't count it down to the period and comma, but it's usually an indicator. If you turn in a paper for everyone that's listening, that's 2,000 words, then I know you really didn't develop the theme and the topics and the answers to the problems and those kind of things. By the way, Tracy, for you and everyone else, I never penalize if you go over.
Okay.
So if you'd like to explain more, give me more, feel free to do that. Not required at all, but if you do go over, no issues. And again, we do consider that as a concern if it goes under.
Okay. The other thing is that, do you want the citations in the paper or just at the end?
Either one. So you can use either APA or MLA format. I don't care if the citations are in the paper or in the bibliography after.
Okay.
I think it's a little easier to put them after. And so I wouldn't make this harder on yourself than you need to be. I would just, whatever you want, but if it were me, I'd put them at the end and make it easy on myself. So,
okay.
And then also make sure you cite websites, etc. Hopefully you're not just using websites, but certainly web links are fine to like books or talks or white papers or whatever. But what we don't want is just a whole stream of, hey, this is some so-and-so's website. So some actual publications for all of you would be helpful. If you don't do that the first time, that's cool. But as we go forward, again, this is a real paper that should have some scholarly effort behind it and making sure we've got some actual good works that you've cited to go forward. And again, that's not for you, Tracy. That's just for everybody in general.
That's okay. I can share it with my group.
Okay, awesome.
Okay.
Were there any other comments or questions, since you represent the entire class apparently tonight?
No, that was it for us.
All right. Well, I wanted to share a little bit of information. You're welcome to jump in as you can. So this week's topic is equal employment opportunity and harassment. Now, I want to start with a little bit about equal employment opportunity, because that's one that tends to be pretty dull. And it tends to be one that's kind of a given in our world, but still is out there. Equal employment opportunity is pretty simple. It says that no matter what my gender, what my political leanings, what my skin color is, my religion, etc., I ought to have an opportunity to have a job. We also have lots of discussions today, and the church has even come out in direction of this, that we should not consider sexual orientation when we look at people for a job. We should be able to employ anyone. We should be able to live with anyone, despite if we don't agree with how they keep the Lord's commandments, speaking of obedience, but we be civil and work with them in the workplace and have good working relationships. My point in mentioning the church is that I'm not exactly sure the publication or when it was, but the Brethren came out a while back when it came to same-sex relationships and said that for employment and housing, that should not be something anyone discriminates against, that people of whoever they are, or whatever their sexual orientation should be able to have a job and should be able to live in a home or apartment where they're not discriminated against to go there. Tracy, any thoughts or anything on that equal employment piece you'd add?
No, not really. My only issue with the whole thing of this lesson, not obviously the case dealt mostly with sexual harassment, but my only issue always has been when you're not finding people of different national origin, gender, or skin color who are qualified for a job.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because most companies don't have what we call quotas anymore. Right. Now, there are some companies that do, because perhaps they have made mistakes. They've done like doohickeys and not hired anyone that's of a diverse nature. And that equal employment opportunity turns into that they get required amount of people. Almost always, when that happens, it's because they probably deserve it. Doohickeys is probably an example that actually might, if that company was any size at all, they might have a government Equal Employment Opportunity Commission investigation, and then someone say, hey, you have to hire this many of this kind of people. But that is rare. Most anyone anymore, and any company I know of, because good talent is so hard to find, so many people, I don't care what you are, I will gladly hire you. And so if you're green with purple polka dots, come work for me if you have the talent that you need.
Yes.
Now the other part, Tracy, I would add is that they're really, the equal employment issue is a lot less volatile than it used to be, because most employers have hopefully learned that lesson. And we do our best to attract some diversity and provide equal employment. We don't discriminate against, we encourage. And I think that's much better than it used to be. Do you have an opinion on that one?
Well, I work for a temporary on-call staffing service, and I was just recently, we contract out for our payroll. I do everything in-house in our industry-specific software, but for workers' comp reasons, we hire out for that. Okay. We were just notified by our payroll company that the federal government now requires a disclosure of race. On most employment things, there's that self-disclosure. If you want to say I'm whatever, you can check the box. Okay. But we are actually now required to report. If they don't report, we're supposed to make a determination based upon observation or documentation of their pictures or so forth. And that was a bit of a surprise for me that they're requiring that. And I'm assuming that this is a check and balance for EEOC on a federal level, that they're trying to make sure that government or businesses are in fact hiring a diversity of a diverse array of employees.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard that in general, and that could be specific to an industry or to a company. So good thoughts. All right, let's talk about harassment a little bit. And again, Tracy, you're not the only person that this is aimed to. I want to share some thoughts and then have your opinion as we go. My voice is a little bit crazy. I've been doing benefit open enrollment meetings for the last 3 days. I think we're at like 20 meetings now, an hour a piece, and so there isn't much left in the voice department. So if it sounds a little bit off, that's where we are for tonight. Harassment. One of the things that I think that is important, and we're talking about sexual harassment here, but I'm going to broaden that scope for our class. I think, again, whether it's bullying, whether it's inappropriate sexual advances, How we doing, Daniel?
How you doing, Brother Bonnie?
Good. Welcome. Glad you're here. We're coming in slow, but we're coming in. Okay. All right.
Hey, Tracy.
Hey, Daniel.
So the concept of harassment is not just a sexual thing. So, for example, a person should be able to go to a job and be free of anything that is considered harassment. So, for example, there shouldn't be off-color jokes there. That would be a form of harassment. There shouldn't be comments about their race. Now, again, that doesn't mean that the word African American or Asian or whatever never comes up. It just doesn't mean that they're pointed out, singled out, problems, etc. Again, we've got Ryan. Welcome. Glad you're here. Well, Ryan came and went. He'll probably be back. So it's not just sexual harassment. So, for example, also men and women should be able to work together. Women should, and men should as well, feel that they should be able to work in a workplace without having any kind of reference to or proposition or whatever the case might be. There's also opportunities, certainly, to make sure that we don't have religious harassment. Certainly our faith knows about that as much as anybody. So if you're a Mormon on a job, you ought to be able to do your thing and work and enjoy that, as well as a Hindu or a Muslim or a Catholic or an atheist or a whatever. It doesn't matter. Again, doesn't mean that no one's going to talk to you about religion, and because we can't have a completely sterile workplace, but it's one that says I shouldn't feel under pressure or pain or whatever because the fact I'm there under certain circumstances. So what do you guys think? I'm rambling again. I want to stop rambling here, but tell me what you guys think about this concept of harassment.
I agree. I'm going to share with you something briefly that happened at work, and I'd just be curious to know what you guys thought. I think that because of the risk of lawsuits, that sometimes we go to the opposite extreme where you can't talk. You know, you can't mention Asian or Hispanic or something like that. I was actually on the phone with a potential employee who was asking about an upcoming hiring, and he had the sweetest accent. It was like French. And so I asked him, I said, I just love your accent. Where are you from? And he said, and his accent was thick enough that I never did get his country. And I said, well, you sound French. And he said, ladies tell me that all the time. And I ended the call. But my boss said to me, you should not have asked him about that. You should not have said, where are you from? And that's where I think that we're going to the other side of the, you know, extreme where I can't say anything, you know.
And Tracy, again, this is my opinion. I've done this a long time. I don't agree with that at all. And I think there's nothing wrong with asking that question. Now, if you were going to use that information and not hire that person based on that, then yeah, you could put yourself at risk or the company at risk. But conversation about, and this is the part about harassment that's hard. People have to talk about things. You know, you're not going to ask, and so probably from a sexual harassment perspective, you know, you're not going to say to an applicant or anybody else in the company, you know, questions about their love life or those kind of things. Those are things you just don't ask. But hey, tell me about your hobbies. What are you interested in? Those type of things are just questions to get to know someone. And if they've got an accent, I guarantee that is not the first time that they've been asked that question. Am I correct?
Yes. Like he says the ladies are always commenting on it.
So, I mean, the thing with harassment is people have to feel comfortable at work. They have to feel like they can be themselves, but they can't feel threatened or bullied or harassed in this case. And that's where, you know, let's say, you know, you have that same conversation, they had a nice accent, and you took that further and said, boy, I'll bet all French people are very romantic, or, you know, or those kind of things, then you're probably getting way too close to that line.
Yes, I agree.
Hey, you know what? Are you from there? And I've never been there, and and I've never been to the Eiffel Tower. Tell me about that. And, you know, those kind of questions are fun. You know, it's just how you talk to people. Because if you never talked about anything personal, what kind of a workplace would that be?
Yeah.
Other opinions, Daniel or Ryan? And Ryan, we'd love to see your smiling face, by the way, unless you're sitting there with a flashlight and not moving. So we'd love to see your smiling face.
I'm actually in the middle of the library, so if I don't say a whole lot, this is why. So.
Okay. Well, you look wonderful sitting there. So,
Well,
so what do you
thank
think?
you.
Any opinions on this harassment issue?
I agree with what has already been said. You know, there comes a fine line between carrying on just friendly conversation and then pushing it just a little bit too far to the point where somebody ends up getting offended with that. And I agree with what you said at the very end. What fun would be the workplace if we didn't have some friendly conversation?
Okay. Ryan, your thoughts?
My thoughts are kind of simple. I just think if we're so afraid to say something wrong, then we will say something wrong. But if we can all have a, you know, kind of an understanding that it's okay to ask someone where they're from or to have a conversation with someone without being scared of retaliation, then it just makes work a way better place.
Okay. Now let's take this a step further. So now let me ask you this. Where do most people meet each other? Now let's take this out of church for now. Let's just talk about the public in general. Perhaps not where Mormons meet each other. Where do most people meet friends, future spouses, romantic interests, etc.? Where do those people meet most of the time?
Work, school, or a bar?
Right? And I'm not sure what order that is, but I do know that work is at the top of that list. My point is, more people and many relationships start at work. Now, if that's the case, and someone is at work and someone asks them on a date, is that sexual harassment?
I would say no to that,
I would agree.
but it depends on
No to
how
the
it's
date?
presented.
No to the date or no to the question?
Know that it's not sexual harassment.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry, that was an attempt at a joke, Daniel. Sorry about that.
No, I got it. I just didn't know how to respond to that one.
Okay. All right. And you know what? That, and absolutely, you guys are absolutely right, is that it is not, you know, if someone says, hey, would you like to go out to dinner or grab a bite at lunch or something like that, there's nothing wrong with that. Here's where things get ugly. And that's where problems can happen, is that when that is not, and let's say, no, I choose not to. And there's another request and another request. And someone starts following someone else, or they start doing some other things. So again, a conversation, even as much as asking somebody on a date, now unless there's a strict no dating policy that's enforced in your company, and companies are having a hard time doing that anymore, you know, for the most part, it's like, okay, thanks, I appreciate that. If you let it go, you're not doing anything wrong. If you take that further, then that's definitely crossing the line. Your thoughts?
Agreed. Anytime I think you pursue something where someone has said to you, I'm not interested, you're crossing a line.
Okay, Daniel?
I was going to ask a question. At what point does a repeated ask for a date with a continued denial become sexual harassment instead of just I'm an annoying coworker, just socially awkward, I can't get him to go away?
Well, let me give a little bit of an answer to that. So if it's a, hey, I can't, I don't know, someone asks for a date or go to dinner or something like that, I can't do that tonight, I'm busy. All right. And you let that go. And they come back and say, hey, are you busy next week? Or not the same day. Let's say they come back a week later. Are you busy next week? And maybe we could do that. And then the answer is still no. I would say no more than 2. Okay. In a lot of cases, if it's definitely no, I do not want to go out with you, then no more than 1. So I think, you know, you have to be really careful with that to make sure that, yes, it's okay, but the window of that is really, really small. So if there's 3 or 4 or 5 requests, that person has definitely crossed the line. Male, female, you name it. They've definitely crossed that line if that's the case. Your thoughts, guys?
I agree.
Welcome back, Ryan.
Thank you. I went on the move.
Obviously, you changed locations.
I did. I lost you for a second, but I'm back now. So.
Okay. All right. So when you look at this, what do you guys think about that? Agreed? If it's more than, I mean, the 2 is really a question mark. 1 is usually okay. 2 is a question mark. Anything beyond that is just definitely a no. And the 2 has to be really, really unique, meaning, hey, we couldn't last week, but maybe this time is okay. Then it would be something like that.
Speaking as a woman, I can tell you that if a man or a young man back in the day asked me out and I was interested, but if it was a timing issue, I had prior commitments or something, you let them know that it's not a permanent no, it's a no to right this time.
Okay.
And I would not have a problem then having a subsequent request.
Okay.
But if I've told someone, no, I don't think that would be a good idea.
That's
I would
it.
hope that I would not get a, yes.
Yeah. And from that perspective, Tracy, that would be anything beyond that, I think is really grounds for what we would call harassment. It's people shouldn't feel like they have to be defending themselves in the workplace against those kind of advances.
Yeah, agree.
So again, that's an opinion I would agree with. Ryan, Daniel, anything else you would add that may be different than that, or even to validate that?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about the latest and greatest thing that is out there in the world of sexual harassment. What's different nowadays with the same gender, different gender, transgender, gender specific, gender non-specific issues? So what's different today than was even out there 5 years ago?
We have 2 trans employees. Both of them are transitioning. They have not completed their, to be truthful, I don't know what you call it when they are in transition, but both of them are in transition to the gender that they desire to be. And we have to be very, very careful of pronouns, because both of them have brought it to our attention what they are trying to be and who they view themselves to be. And so we have notes on the files in the computer, so that if you pick up the phone and it's them on the line, you know which pronoun you're supposed to be using. One in particular takes strong offense if we use the wrong pronoun. And because both of them have specifically said this is how we see ourselves, based upon our understanding of the law, we have to respect that and act accordingly.
Okay. And I would say, Tracy, even if the law didn't tell you, I think that would probably be appropriate, because of the climate that we're in today that says, hey, if someone identifies that I would like you to call me XYZ, then it probably makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I have one suggestion that really makes this easy. And that suggestion is, whatever that person would like to be called, don't worry about him or her or them, and certainly not it. But the things like call them by name,
Yes.
Call them by Sam or Sue or Larry or whatever. And if that doesn't fit your definition of what that person's name is, that's not, not for you to say.
Yes.
And that easiest from an HR perspective is just call those people by name.
Yep.
And you know what? And if it's, let's say you're talking about someone, hey, I had to go get that file from Sam or Sue or Larry, or they had it in their office, not necessarily he or she. So you can do that really easy. You call them by name, or you use the whatever the word is in English, whatever you call that. You call them they. Yeah, and again, and then the other one is if you're talking to them, you say you. Hey, can I get you something for lunch? Would you like to come with us to go here? We were having a meeting. Are you ready to come? So if you're talking directly, call them you, or call them by name. If you're talking about them, say, hey, they had that report last and I didn't have it, or they went off to a meeting, or whatever the case might be. And then I think that really makes that much easier. And then again, or you can say, hey, Sam had that last, or Susie had that last, or whatever the case might be. So I think it goes along with this is forget the people have a right to be called by whatever name they choose. So for example, most of our applications anymore have a full given name, and you have to have that. It's the name on the driver's license, the name on the social security card, the name on the birth certificate, but they can also have a preferred name.
Yes.
So, I mean, like my name is Jeffrey. All right. Please don't call me Jeffrey. You know what? My preferred name is Jeff. All right. You know what? That's no different in today's world than a guy that wants to be called Sue, or a girl that wants to be called George, or whatever the case might be. It's really the same concept. You call people what they would like to be. Now, I'm rambling here. Thoughts? Agree? Disagree? Say I'm crazy? What do you think?
I actually thought that was really good counsel, and I'm going to share it at work.
I actually had an experience similar to what you described, Brother Bonnie. A couple of months ago, my dad had an employee working for him who was in the process of transitioning. And it seems like Tracy's and co-workers, he was very laid back, very relaxed, and he's in the process of transitioning over to a woman. And if he slipped up, he or she just laughed it off. And it's an easygoing situation. And if you went up and just said, hey, how's it going? Just avoided pronouns altogether. I found it's often easier to replace it with nouns instead of saying, hey, he wants this, or she wants this. Say, hey, my friend here would like to do this, or my coworker wants that.
Yeah.
Very good.
That is a great
I've actually seen that counsel in action, and it's highly effective.
Okay, very good, Dan. Thank you. That's a great recommendation. So, excellent thought. And again, this is not easy, and especially if we say they're wrong, or we say, you know what, I disagree with those things. They're not keeping God's commandments, and they shouldn't be doing that. I get all that, but the world we live in says, you know what, we accept people for who they are, and again, at the same time, that doesn't mean we can't be who we are. I'm Jeff, I'm this, I'm a Mormon, I'm this, I'm that. You know what? I have a right to be those things as much as anybody else does. So those things, that's a one-way street, it's a two-way street. And that's treating people with respect and dignity, and not using words and learning words that people aren't offended by. Again, you can always call somebody by name. If their name on the employee record says something and they prefer to become called something else, you probably ought to call them what they're preferred to be called. It's not new. I mean, if you have, again, my name, Jeffrey and Jeff, if you've got someone that starts at your company and doesn't want to be called Jeffrey, don't call them that. And certainly if the transgender issue is there, then that certainly makes it even more real. If he looks like a Fred, don't call him Fred. And if he wants to be called Sally, call him Sally. I mean, it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
Now, hard to do, simple in concept. Ryan, I've been talking again too much. Your thought?
No, I agree with all those things. I've never really had any experience with this. All I've ever done is work in agriculture, and so the extent of my HR goes to working with Hispanic help who doesn't necessarily speak English very well, or doesn't always understand what I'm trying to say. And so my struggle has always been, how do I communicate what I'm trying to say effectively so that the work can be done, not what do I call them, or how do we interact with each other on a professional basis, because it's very laid back and it's very friendship oriented, and it's very just let's work together and we'll get a job done. And if you can get a job done, I'll respect you and I'll love you, and just like anyone. So.
Okay. All right. You know what? That is not is off base at all, Ryan. That counsel is very good because that really basically says we communicate about the work. Now, that doesn't mean if you spoke the language, you wouldn't communicate about other things, but you're being respectful and working with those people with your and their limitations, because that's not just the limitation you have.
Yeah. No,
that's a limitation. That's not their limitation. That's your limitation as well.
Yeah, and like you were saying, that's a two-way street of we're both struggling to understand.
Sure.
And so, I mean, I can get mad and he can get mad, but in the end, we're both trying to figure it out, and we still remain friends no matter if I have to show him what to do or he has to show me what to do, or vice versa.
Okay, so. Very good. Well, when you talk about harassment, you know, that would be the kind of thing you could say, you know, when you work with people like that, you turn around and talk to a coworker and say, those darn blanks, or I hate working with them. Yeah, why don't they go back where they came from? Or, you know, then you've done something that is, first of all, not a gospel principle to do. Second of all, it's not good work. You know, it's not good at work effectiveness. And third, it's probably wrong and illegal. So
yeah, no, and
doing things that like that are great counsel. So go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, and it's true. There have been instances where one of my coworkers has said, "Man, like they just don't understand," and it's kind of like started, I guess, not bad mouthing, but kind of venting his frustration. And I've had to stop him right there and say, "No, listen, like it's a two-way street. Like we can't talk bad about them, even if they may be doing it about us, because we don't understand them, but they don't understand us." And so, I don't know. I just think it's important that you don't talk bad about them, because it seems simple, but in reality, like that's not okay, and it shouldn't be done. Right. Even if it is wrong, it shouldn't be done if it is illegal or not illegal. So.
Other part, this is, I'm going to add one more part of this. We had an individual where I used to work in a previous company, and about their sexual orientation. They were open about things they did, and it made other people uncomfortable. So this is the one coming my way. And I think we also, as HR people or managers or leaders, have the responsibility to say, hold on, okay? You know what? I appreciate you sharing this with me. In my mind, that's not appropriate to our workplace, and I'd really rather not have this discussion. Again, to the point, blunt, not rude or offensive, but you know, at the same time, if someone has an agenda they're trying to put across, and take that. So part of this is you have a right to be who you want, and if you don't want to hear about someone's sexual exploits of any kind, male, female, or whatever, then we have a right to speak up and say, this is what I don't want to have happen. So it's not like because of this current climate, you have to sit and listen to somebody that's saying something that would be completely inappropriate. So it is a two-way street, and I'm glad you used that example. We have to treat people with dignity and respect. We can also expect that in return, and if you don't, then you have a right to say something about it. So other thoughts from the three of you?
I just think that sometimes we forget as members of the church that I feel like that most people I've come in contact with, they will give respect pretty freely, and not always do we get that in return from people. And so I think that we, at least myself, does have a little bit of understanding in that area, more so than anything else that we've kind of been talking about. So.
Okay, very good. Daniel or Tracy?
Good.
Okay.
I got nothing else to say. Just
all right. Okay.
Agree with what's been said.
These are great discussions, and I appreciate the thoughts. I appreciate the example. There are 4 of us here. Everyone had some example that was appropriate to this concept of harassment. Either one we tried to make sure we avoided, or ones that we tried to work with that could have been offensive to someone. And I would argue that if you're in society at all, and by the way, this even includes the church sometimes now, You have a responsibility. I have a responsibility to treat people with dignity and respect. That whole concept of what I call someone by name is always good. They or them, neutral pronouns, just help people feel like they're okay, and not, if they walk in on that conversation you're having with somebody else, that they wouldn't be offended to be there. And by the way, I can think of one person that would really, really, in my opinion, it's all this is, agree with that, and that would be the Savior. You know, I know that he wouldn't be offensive no matter what that person did, whether he agreed with them or not. He may tell them in religious terms they were doing something wrong, but he would not be offensive back to them, and to be. So I think that's important to remember, is that, you know what, the Savior wouldn't be offensive or harass or anything else. Now, he would handle each of those relationships perfectly. Guess what? We probably won't. And so the other way to look at this is there's probably hey, I didn't mean to offend you. And if there's an apology that's necessary, maybe we're quick with that, and try to keep people on our good side. It doesn't mean we need to be perfect, because you'll never say anything. You'll just sit there with like a lump and do your job all day. So,
can I share something from our discussion?
Absolutely, Tracy, go ahead.
Daniel was in our discussion. He's in our group, and the one thing that struck me from our group actually happened towards the end. One of our group members actually experienced sexual harassment and went through a whole thing in the company. But the thing that she pointed out was the word that kept getting tossed around in our discussion was anonymity. You know, we want to be able to report without anybody knowing, you know, who did it and so forth. And she changed our thinking by suggesting not so much anonymity, but she used the word confidentiality. And that really struck me, because I don't know that you can have anonymity in a company sometimes, you know, when you're seeking out witnesses and so forth. People are going to have to talk to different people. But I really liked the perspective of confidentiality, that you can keep.
Okay. All right. And the 100%. The other part I would add to that, Tracy, is that, you know, sometimes if someone has an issue or concern, to get to the bottom of things, you have to ask questions. Okay. Sometimes that's really tough to do, but you really have to work in it to keep people confidence by keeping things confidential. All right. You don't go out there and say, hey, so-and-so reported this. We're trying to figure out if it really happened or not. You know, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. You know, time out. You just ruined whatever you were trying to do there anyway. So that's wise counsel, as much as you can. Now, sometimes it's hard to figure out what happened if people know who you're talking about anyway, but you have every responsibility as an HR person to do all you can there.
Yeah.
So good thought, Tracy. Thank you so very much. Okay. All right. Good discussion. I'm going to give my voice a rest and call this for a night. Any other final thoughts from any of the three of you? And again, thank you so much for being here tonight. Appreciate it. Any final thoughts on this concept of affirmative action and harassment?
Not for me.
All right.
I can't think of any.
I'll post this on our Google community, and thank you guys for being there. Again, for everybody, a reminder that our doohickeys paper, our first one, is due Monday morning at the end of week 5, and we will look forward to that and have some fun with those. So hopefully that all goes well.
Daniel,
Everybody have a great night.
I just wanted to share with Daniel. Daniel, he says we can do APA or MLA, and the citations are up to us whether we put them in the paper or in the bibliography.
Okay, that's nice.
Yep,
Yeah.
whichever way you want to do it.
Thanks for not making that very specific. Some teachers,
I
it's
thought it was
either
very
this,
generous.
exact.
No, I really don't. You know, why would, I guess I just don't care. I mean, English teachers, I get that, but everybody else, like, as long as you use the approved format and just don't put a bunch of mumbo jumbo down about references, I would say use APA or MLA, use whichever one you want, and some of those go by footnotes or by bibliography. But whatever you want, and I don't care about which one it is, just give me the references. Daniel, I told Tracy, I think it may be easier for you to put them at the end of the paper instead of trying to have to footnote things. But that one's up to you, whatever one you want to do.
Now, with the solutions and the problems, are we supposed to have a source for every?
No, no. I would say, here's the guideline I would give for you and everybody else. A couple of things. I would say wording is 3,500 to 5,000 words. You can go more, but I don't want you to go less. When it comes to sources, you need to cite the sources and where they are and what they're for, but you don't need a source for everything you're telling me. A paper of this length ought to have between 7 and 15 sources. Okay? There's nothing wrong with 7. I get some bibliographies that are literally a page and a half long. That's great. I'm thrilled to see those. Awesome, awesome, awesome. But if you've got 6 or 7 or 8 citations, that's nothing wrong with that at all. If you give me 2 or 3, that tells me you didn't do any work. Okay? So I'm a pretty common sense instructor. So I would say, you know, do your best and give me enough that show me you did the work, and I'm okay from there.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Good thoughts. You guys have a great
All
night,
Thank you,
and
you
we'll
too.
look forward to seeing that.
Okay.
All
Bye.
right. So long.
Thank you. See ya.
So long.